Traditional communities do not often voluntarily give up or sell the resources on which their communities are based until their communities have been destroyed. They also do not willingly allow their land bases to be damaged so that other resources, gold, oil, and so on, can be extracted. It follows that those who want the resources will do what they can to destroy traditional communities.
Our people, we say, have been there since time immemorial.
Prior to invasion and conquest, colonization, lands in North America were occupied by populations of people that had a profoundly different relationship with the land.
They live with the land. All the ceremonies that have come up have to do with celebrating the renewal of seasons and life and affirming all of that.
One thing about Indigenous peoples is that there's always the idea that you have to live in balance. And, you know, emotionally, physically, spiritually, emotionally, you have to have balance. And so this same philosophy was applied to the natural world that they lived in.
The Tolowa, on whose land I now live, weren't civilized. They didn't live in cities. They didn't require the importation of resources. They lived in villages, camps. And they lived there for 12,500 years if you believe the myths of science. If you believe the myths of the Tolowa, they lived there since the beginning of time.
I think that what we have had in Indigenous societies all along is a very kind of common sense, a very practical approach to why it's important to treat the world around you, the natural world, in a good way.
Our people never exploited more than what we needed. We respect the land, we respect the animals, we respect the water, we respect the air, the wind, the fire, all the sacred elements, and we believe that they all are living things. So I suspect that's the way it was before contact.
The stories that we have about our relationship to each other and to the land and to any spiritual aspect, any deities, arise from our relationship with the land. And the salmon were considered to be our mentors, caregivers, life givers. They were equal to us. In fact, all things that have form were equal to us. We weren't about dominating.
The spiritual relationship that our peoples had prior to invasion with all of creation, and recognizing that all beings have a spiritual essence, a spiritual entity, and that if we want to live in this universe in a good way, that it was absolutely essential that we learned how to maintain respectful relations with all of creation. When Europeans came to this land, it was with such a rapacious appetite. It still has not been sated.
They brought Christianity, they brought colonization, and certainly they did bring civilization.
They came in and they were sent with this commission, they felt, apparently, to dominate the land, and it was just basically there for the taking. These people would accept beads or just kind of get out of the way, and of course they had superior firepower at that time too.
Right off the bat, with Christopher Columbus landing in the Caribbean region on what is today Haiti and the Dominican Republic, they initiated almost immediately a genocide down there that depopulated most of the nation there, the Taino and the Arawaks. And one of the main things that happened was the introduction of diseases, which was basically biological warfare.
The smallpox was spread through tobacco and blankets and given to the Indian people. So it didn't take them long to be decimated because they were pure. And the smallpox was vicious, very vicious.
When Europeans came, much of what they were interested in was rapid resource exploitation. They wanted to get wealthy in the New World. And as they were seeking that wealth, they worked with indigenous nations to undermine traditional economies and undermine the relationship that indigenous populations have with the land, so that indigenous peoples could then do the work of resource exploitation and extraction for the Europeans so that they could get wealthy.
In imposing those things on indigenous peoples, of course, they destroyed indigenous peoples and their nations and their way of life. Generally, indigenous peoples suffered 90% or more depopulation rate upon having contact with Europeans. It was a genocide, war for territory, because the Europeans wanted to take the resources.
Settler society has worked to destroy what it needs to live, and that's suicidal. It's a suicidal mission. There's no way that it can be sustainable in the long term.